Hey everyone, welcome to the Giving Town podcast brought to you by the Joyful Roberts Group. I'm your host, Danielle Roberts, and I'm looking forward to sharing my recent conversation with Clay Downing, the new superintendent for CPRD, or Chehalem Parks and Recreation District. Also, make sure you subscribe to our newsletter to get our latest podcast episodes, YouTube videos, housing market updates, homeowner tips, and more. Well, in today's episode, Clay is going to share about some of the exciting projects that CPRD has been working on and what we can expect over the next couple of years. We're going to learn about Clay and what led him to this position, and he'll share a bit more detail about what CPRD actually is and how it functions separate from the city of Newberg. And we got into quite a few other fun topics as well. So with that, here is our conversation. Clay, thanks so much for joining me today on the Giving Town podcast. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Daniel. I'm happy to be here.
Well, it's kind of funny because I think the first time I'd talked to you about doing a podcast episode together is when you were still at city planning. And I kind of had a different idea of like what we would talk about. And then you got this new job and I was like, well, now we really have to talk because now you're ahead of CPRD. You're not with planning anymore. So it'll be a good conversation.
Well, I'm really happy to be here. Either when I was at the city, which was a great experience, or now being with CPRD, which is also a great experience so far. But as you know, I'm still pretty new.
Well, and it's funny because some people listening might not even know that CPRD, which is Chehalem Parks and Recreation District, is a separate entity from the city. And that kind of leads into the first question for people who don't know how a Parks and Recreation District works, like how it's separate from just like a city's park and recs department. Could you share about that? Like basically what is CPRD and how it works here?
Absolutely. So Chehalem Park and Recreation District is a type of special district. And in Oregon and lots of states, frankly, there are a number of different types of special districts. And that can be a fire district, a water district. It can be a park and recreation district. It can be a lot of things that your typical city government may or may not do themselves. Here in Newberg, we have Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. And so they're a special district as well. And for us, what it means is Chehalem Park and Rec, we get to specialize. It's like being a city, but with only one department. And so we get to be fully committed to parks and recreation. And I think that's really special that, when times get tough, we still just focus on parks and rec. When times are really good economically, that's still our focus. So we can really specialize in what we do, and the resources we invest in there are there for the community. And I think for anyone that's familiar with cities and city departments, is they have a couple of departments that are really high touch. The police, one would argue that's one version of high touch that most people hope they don't have to get too involved with. But so are libraries and so are parks, because those are things that you get to directly interact with, directly consume. As opposed to there's sometimes some things are going on in the background. And so for parks, that's something that I'm really excited about and what made the jump from city government really exciting into CPRD and what we do.
So how was actually maybe a better question is when did CPRD become its own entity and why did that happen compared to just parks being run by the city?
So I don't know the full why because I certainly wasn't around, but it was in 1967 and it became a special district, and that was based on a parks committee here in Newberg. And a group, and Jakewith Park is named after one of the founders. We have some other kind of founding names associated with the district that are around the district. And they got to make a decision and put it on the ballot to become a special district. And a lot of our older parks are also owned by the city, but they're managed by the park district. So they became managed under the park district earlier.
Okay.
And so they may still be owned outright by the city, but are largely managed and controlled, kind of day-to-day operated by Chehalem Park and Rec.
Okay. Now I remember we were talking earlier about you guys manage about 1,000 acres.
That's right.
But you only own a portion of that, again, because some of them are, at this point, the majority is actually you own as CPRD, right?
If you went by acres, the vast majority of the acres are owned by us, in part because we have some of our parks and facilities are quite large.
Right.
So you think of Bob and Crystal Riley Park, which is just over 300 acres, and the golf course, which is also quite large. You get even out to Ewing Young, and that's, I believe, a little over 40 acres.
Yeah. So then, and that, the numbers don't matter as much, but that's interesting. So as far as this being a special district in Newberg, and you really go all the way out to, what's the farthest one out? You have Dundee. The
city of Dundee, city of Newberg are both within our district. And then about trying to remember the figure. I think about 25 to 30% of our residents that we serve are located in unincorporated areas too. And so we serve about between 32 and 36,000 people. Okay. And so that's the community service that we have for direct service. But obviously, when folks visit town, so visitors, businesses, we consider them part of the folks that we serve too. So, for example, we work closely with the Chamber of Commerce and with Taste Newberg and other partners to make sure that visitation to town is something we get to participate in and help inform them on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting discussion how all those things work. Like the stable table, for example, was kind of like a collection of Taste Newberg and the city of Newberg and the now I'm spacing the which way Newberg Downtown Coalition. Mm-hmm. Are you guys a part of that?
We are friendly, but they're their own entity. Okay. And so we talk to them regularly, and I think that we have some really good relationships. And I personally feel that we're also, I would consider CPRD to be a resident of the downtown area because of the cultural center, because we own the cultural center. Yeah. And that's a whole story all by itself with that entity. We are on a long-term lease to the nonprofit inside there, but it's our building. And it's a great relationship and really powerful. Yeah.
So across Oregon, do you know how many special districts there are? That are, I mean, not like, but I mean specifically for Parks and Rec compared to like other cities who might just manage it themselves.
I should know, and I don't. Okay.
And I should have thought to ask that question, prepare you ahead. But half of the questions I ask on these episodes are all like, I come up with on the spot, like, oh, I never thought about this before.
But I can tell you it is, so there are different ways to do it. So just so that everyone that might be listening is clear, we are not part of the city of Newberg. Right. And we're not part of the city of Dundee. We're an independent entity. We have our own elected officials. We have our own tax revenue that comes from the public and that we're responsible for. We do have some of the other big park and recreation special districts in Oregon are not too far away. So the biggest one in the state is Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District that we see up in Beaverton area and some of the surrounding area. I don't know exactly where their boundaries are, but then others like Willamette Lane that serve down in Springfield. So they're not wildly uncommon for areas that want to make sure they get those. And it lets that sharing of resources happen too across districts, for example, that we get to work on Dundee and Newberg and the surrounding area holistically instead of siloing those communities into their own buckets because they are so close and connected.
Yeah. Well, I know we have a lot of things to get to, like some of the cool projects you guys are working on. But the question I wanted to get to first is how you actually ended up here. And for some people, they might say, well, why go to city planning and then to CPRD? Or those two, how are they? For some people, they may have no clue how they're different. But you actually had time when you were in Ventura in California that you're kind of doing work similar to this. You kind of have a dual background, right? Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. So the last a little over 2 years, I was with the city of Newberg. My wife and I had come up here in late 22 and got to be the planning manager. And this came out, and this opportunity was really special to me because instead of the approximately 10 years of community development and planning work that I had with local government, I got to expand on that to work I had done previously in my life for over 10 years working in outdoor recreation, outdoor education. I worked for nonprofits, and I worked for a concessionaire inside of a national park, and even worked when I was in university teaching outdoor recreation classes. So I got to do those, which was really special. And specifically in the Ventura area, that was what took me out of my kind of hometown area in Indiana and brought me out to California. And I helped manage a nature preserve for the Nature Conservancy. And then later helped run adventure programs for a concessionaire inside of Channel Islands National Park. So those were pretty related to these, but they're very different from my planning background. So I get to do both now.
Yeah. Well, and to me, it seems like having a planning background would be helpful because you now understand all the city code and how that works. And okay, if we're wanting to do, this type of project, here's all the hoops that we're going to have to jump through and all that, right?
Right. That's precisely right. Because one of the things I think people don't talk about or have to think about most of the time is that those parks that you go to, someone had to build them. And they're very specialized, really unique facilities and spaces. And so if it's something, whether it's a golf course, which we manage Chehalem Glenn Golf Course, or if it's the aquatic center, which clearly that's a specialized facility that even before its current version, it was a community pool. Or if it's something like the armory or those things, you're building things. Someone has to be responsible for building those and stewarding those in their lifespans as they age and have all the things that go along with it. But then you can get down to as detailed as the playgrounds. Mm-hmm. And even the playgrounds, there's a lot of specialization because you want to make sure they're safe and they work right and that everybody gets to enjoy them. So having that planning background is really great to think about. How do you take something from a piece of land and a concept all the way up to it's built and people get to enjoy it?
Yeah. Which actually touches on another subject real quick, going back to the first question about what a Parks and Recreation District does. So it's not just parks though, like that's a big part of it, but the recreation side of like having opportunities for like gymnastics or for doing like a sports camp or different things that anyone in the community can sign up for and be a part of, right? So what?
Absolutely.
Can you give us some examples of the different things that you do, that you provide outside of like the parks, for example?
Right. And so if you think about the things that are kind of passive, you just get to show up and enjoy them. There are parks, there are playgrounds, and there are trails. And I think one of the things that to me is really unique about some of those things is that we're in a couple of cities that are surrounded by high value agricultural land. We don't have national forests right on our doorstep or anything like that. So having trails at a Ewing Young or a Bob and Crystal Riley are extra special. And it makes those, even the smaller parks like a Spring Meadow or Memorial Park, extra important to go to the playground, enjoy some trees, get some shade and some just outdoor enjoyment in a daily or weekly kind of ritual. But then there's other things like we do youth sports, we do adult sports, we do daycare programs for school-aged kids. We do our recreation programs, have camps through the summer. They do esports. They do all sorts of things that people don't know. And I would say that if you wanted to get into kind of the potpourri of park stuff, our recreation program is really where some of those things are hidden that are really unique and can be niche, and that we get to play around with what we provide for people. But then we've also got stuff like our golf course. So our Chehalem Glenn golf course, which has a whole trail loop around it, is a public golf course as opposed to a private one, which makes it unique. And then there's our aquatics facilities. We've got swimming and aquatics. We've got a competition pool, and we've got kind of a lazy river recreation pool. So we've got all sorts of great facilities.
You're also in an interesting position, being that you're not really nonprofit. You're not really like a government entity, but you kind of are because you're funded by tax dollars.
Well,
right?
let me step in. We're definitely a governmental entity.
Okay.
So we have elected board members. We get tax revenue. We're just a special district, which is a type of governmental entity.
Okay.
So it's a type of local government. And so the typical ones that you would see around Oregon would be county governments, city governments, and special districts. So those are your local government entities that you would see. And there's probably other iterations that if you really wanted to get into it, you could consider, but that's how I would characterize those. And so we're definitely a government entity.
I guess hence the elections being who votes the board members in.
Absolutely. That would definitely be part of it. We've got 2 new board members coming in just in the next month.
And my point being though is that whenever you're funded by tax dollars, you have the people who are always they take issue with how things are done. And they want to know, how is their money being spent? Is it being spent wisely? And I know have to do some of the addressing of that. And we talked a little bit offline of your perspective that maybe you could share.
Yeah. And I think that people asking for more information. So I think there's different types of people that want to know what we do, and for different reasons. And one of those sets of people, because we're a governmental entity, are the folks that they would like to understand from an accountability standpoint. They want to know, how are those dollars being used and what's the service delivery that's coming out? Are the residents and the visitors and the other folks, anyone that's associated with that tax base, are they getting the value that they put into their local governmental entity? In our case, our special district. So to me, that's really important that we do some things and communicate that, and we're not scared to answer those questions. I'm really hopeful that we can find some new tools in the next year or so to communicate those sorts of things out to the public so that they can have greater level of certainty and they don't feel scared that we're not using it correctly. They can see that we've demonstrated and made a good faith effort to be accountable to the public.
And then you have the people, and this is always going to be the case, that you've clearly said what you're doing and then they disagree that it's a good idea. For example, you mentioned some people feel like the the golf course is controversial. Now, I've played golf before. I'm terrible at golf. So, it's not something that I use. And from non-golfers, they, they see, oh, well, there's this new clubhouse going in, for example, or that this is, my understanding is I'm not super into what's going on, but there's the new clubhouse. There's all this, all these new renovations that are going to, cost all this money. And some people are unhappy because they're not the ones who are going to benefit because they don't play golf. And so, but then you look at, well, what was and correct me if I'm wrong, the original plan was that there were supposed to be certain amenities there that never were put in, and now they're being put in, right?
So that's what we're going for, and we're just trying to make sure we go through it in a thoughtful way. So for years and years, the Chehalem Glenn Golf Course has talked about putting in a permanent clubhouse because the facility that we have in there now was initially envisioned as being temporary, but it's been there since 2005, so it doesn't feel temporary. And it's on the district to make sure we do a good job communicating that. Right now, what we're preparing to do is put out a feasibility study. So we're going to be putting out a call for proposals to consultants and firms to do this feasibility study for us, because what we want to make sure is that when we do additional development at that golf course, that it's not a burden on the rest of the district. And so it's really, again, that accountability to everyone to make sure that we're not prioritizing some users over the rest of the district, that we're making sure. And I think that, and it's one of the things some of our board members talk about, is that we have special interests. Everyone's got their thing that they love more than the other things. And that's okay, because we're supposed to serve diverse interests and make sure that people are happy with what they're getting. But that means making sure there's an outlet for those things. So our golf course, we have an 18-hole golf course. We already have land acquired to add a third 9 to make it a bigger golf course with more holes, which lets us host tournaments and not have to shut the entire golf course down from the public. So it can really be a public golf course that gets to be available even when we host special events. And then a clubhouse is something that I think it's on us as a public golf course that to figure out if there's a design that can be very multifunctional, that doesn't just serve the golf community, but serves our residents, serves our other visitors, and maybe serves our businesses with special events, hosting other alternative types of activities. And that's why we're doing a feasibility study before we really greenlight the project.
Yeah, I think that's what you have to do. And there's always going to be people upset. You just have to, again, make sure that you're being accountable and transparent. But I'd heard about this, and I'm actually just pulling up Google Maps now. Where's the third 9 going to be? Is it going to be?
So it extends from Chehalem Glenn Golf Course southward towards Wilsonville Road, kind of over a little hill that's there.
Okay, so right now there's that. The Chehalem Glenn Loop, the
Getman Loop Trail,
mm-hmm. which goes right along that. There's a little Lake Creek in there.
Yep.
Right. And then on the other side of that is just kind of there's nothing really there. So now the golf course would those trees all come down, or how?
It's not those trees. That's actually not most of the area.
Okay.
And I don't know the entirety of the property, but a lot of it is kind of a hillside slope that I believe is planted with grass or grass seed. Okay. We've got out at release right now, and then that would get extended. The golf course would extend out that way. And we have a design for the golf course itself.
Okay.
But right now, what we're doing with the feasibility study is that's going to lead into design for the golf course clubhouse. And we need to make sure that pencils for the district and the golf course itself, and then it's not a financial anchor or burden.
Yeah.
That it's something that'll really be used in the way that we want. So we're trying to be thoughtful in how we do that.
Okay. Which actually reminds me, looking up, I know this is audio only, so people can't actually see what we're looking at here, but I know the bypass is eventually going to be going right through there, right? The phase 2.
That's right.
So how is that going to work? Is that going to cut off some of the holes, or
it will shorten a few of the holes? And so some of it will get displaced, and some of that impact is shared by, I believe, Portland Community College and Providence Hospital, as well as ourselves. Okay. And so we're going to make sure that we adapt to those things, but it should be a relatively minimal impact, and we're ready to do that. And so that's been in the works, and those conversations have been happening for a long time. Right. And so we'll still have a golf course.
Yeah. I was just curious how much of an impact it has, because I was trying to picture where's the road going to be?
And I will be honest, it's hard for me to do it without looking at a map, which for the folks who are listening, we don't have a map in front of us right now that shows exactly where the projects is going to be. But a lot of it goes through that Portland Community College, those field spaces, which we currently use for lacrosse games and things like that. So that will disrupt some of our other sports in addition to the golf course, but we do that jointly with PCC.
And I know there's a lot of other upcoming projects that I want to talk about. But I guess the question, and you kind of answered it in a way, but like when you look at the main priorities for CPRD, that kind of reflects why some of these other projects are happening, right? And then you mentioned the mission, which is kind of honestly sounds a bit like GPT made it. It's very
right. It's very broad.
To enrich, say it again. Do you
enrich and connect. Oh shoot, I don't have it in front of me anymore. Okay. But enrich and connect people in the community with parks, open spaces, educational opportunities, and I'm leaving out a few things because I don't have it memorized in front of me. But it's really that connection and that enrichment that are the most fulfilling things, because parks and recreation are very high touch. They're very much about quality of life, and we want to make sure that we're contributing to this being a place that people want to live and work and play in our Newberg, Dundee, and surrounding areas. So that's something that I think is really important, and that all of those activities get to contribute to.
Yeah. I don't mean that as an insult when I say it. It sounds like it's ChatGPT, but connect and enrich. I mean, it's words we don't necessarily use every day, but it is what CPRD is about, is actually bringing people together, connecting, and enriching is just, making lives better. And I think when you think about it that way, it kind of opens up a lot of the possibilities of what can be done.
Right. And it is really broad. And that's why it sounds like kind of a generic AI generated mission, maybe to someone who's, it just feels very broad. And mission statements are supposed to be broad, but whether it's someone being able to take their kids to a playground that they feel comfortable at and can really create some good memories and have a good time, or have a barbecue, or be able to host something for Veterans Day at Memorial Park, for example, or be able to go do swim lessons. Like we've partnered with the high school and are offering swim lessons in the aquatics center. And that's something that's really special for people that are in high school, and that could lead to future jobs, which we really hope that we get to be an early employee or employer of many of our students and young people around here, which is another, I think, unsung thing that the district does, because we have so many part-time employees that serve folks.
How many employees do you have?
It's a great question. So we have a total of 208 employees.
Okay.
34 of them are full-time.
Okay.
So that is a lot of part-time employees left out of 208. And if you think about those, that can be people that are working at our golf course. That can be people that are instructors in classes and recreation programs. That can be people that are, like I said, lifeguards or instructors with our aquatic center.
Yeah.
And so they can really do some really amazing things. It can also be folks that are helping us out as, for example, referees or as marshals on the golf course.
Okay.
So between our adult sports and our youth sports, our aquatics, our recreation programs, we have a lot going on. And so there's a lot to be offered to any given community member, as well as those people that maybe they're looking for a part-time job. And that can be young people, and that can be very late career, later in life people. I think the golf course is actually a fantastic example of that, because one of the things we have there are a number of both high school and college age students that will be there, alongside people who are there retired, and they're really looking at some of the fringe benefits they get along from having a part-time gig at the golf course.
Yeah.
Which I think is a great opportunity.
Well, I want to get into some of the, I guess, what I would consider the meat of the conversation. So the projects that are coming up that I personally have been pretty interested in, wondering like, okay, what's happening with this? And I remember, I think it might have been last year. I can't remember. The years go by so quickly these days. It was one of the big CPRD board meetings when they were talking about the trail at Ewing Young. Like they wanted to make a bridge across there. And there's this whole, someone put in the paper that, what was it, Matt? Was it Matt? It's Matt Smith.
Matt Smith is one of our board members, but I'm not sure what's going for.
No, they said like, there's a comment about him being like, well, he said he wanted to build bridges and now he's, stopping it. And it was like, honestly, totally misrepresented what he was actually like. It's like, well, no, it's not like he's saying, I don't want a bridge. They misrepresented this thing. So everyone was kind of all up in arms about why should we do this? And then we realized, the public really had a very different understanding of what actually is happening.
So we have 3 different projects that will be under construction just this summer. Ewing Young is not one of them, the bridge there. We still are pursuing that. We're just kind of taking the low conflict version. So what happened for the district is that CPRD went into a design review application with both the county and the city of Newberg simultaneously. Because there's currently on that approximately 40-acre site at Ewing Young Park, there's about 10 acres we can't get to that's on the west side of the west and south side of the park. And the bridge would let us activate that side. Good thing for the public, right? You get 10 more acres, you get more park. However, there was an issue with some of the interpretations of the bridge in some of the county code. So although we got approved by the city limits boundary and the urban growth boundary both go right along the creek that bridge would span over.
Right.
And so the county ran into this interpretation that they had used in other trails type of interpretations and applications and said, nope, that's considered a transportation facility and that's not allowed here.
Right.
We don't completely agree with that, but at the same time, we don't necessarily want to go to war with a district that another entity that we work with all the time. And so we're trying to find a low conflict way of doing that without escalating that to something like LUBA and those sorts of things if we don't have to. Could we? Maybe.
And you'd started the process and then dropped it, if I remember right.
That's right. And that was before I joined the district.
Yeah, which is whatever that meeting was that I went to.
That's right.
I think it was like a year ago. Point being, with things like that, it takes a long time for things to happen.
Right. And I think the board's position at that time, or a majority of the board, because there was a pretty intense discussion about this, about do we want to take this higher conflict pathway, or do we want to try and maybe walk this a little bit slower and see if we can find a way that doesn't have us escalate this to a more confrontational setting. And so that's the direction that staff has gotten from our board. And so that's what we're following right now. Yeah. And so we've actually reached out to the county. We're still actively speaking with them. We'll be doing outreach this summer to the neighbors nearest to that park to talk to them about the concerns that they have of us activating that space. I mean, to me, it doesn't sound like a huge concern if I got extra park directly in my backyard.
Yeah.
I would be pretty okay with it, particularly if you made sure that I had a way of getting over to it.
Yeah.
But if folks do have concerns, that's the whole point of doing public outreach. They can share those with those if they're reasonable, and if we have a way of managing those, sure, we're happy to address issues. We want people to be excited that the park is near them, not be scared of it.
Yeah. Well, the ironic thing, at least in my mind, I live right over there in that neighborhood. We go down to the that creek there, and there's homeless people that live in that 10 acres because no one else is over there. So they kind of see that as their free space. So it's kind of, to me, seems a little bit ironic.
It's good to have an example that's not theoretical. So you've seen it, you've been there. But to me, particularly from that planning background, when you don't activate spaces, then you can have problems in particular. But having a bridge, having a trail go back there, it's not eyes on the street in this case, it's eyes in the park,
right?
Eyes on the trail would be a good thing from an activation standpoint. We really hope that message can come across when we talk to those neighbors, but I don't think enough of those conversations happened previously. So I don't want to make assumptions that they aren't correct in what they're doing. I just want to understand what they are.
Yeah.
And so we're expecting to do that sometime over the summer to speak with those folks on that specific project.
What do you feel like a timeline on that could look like from?
Oh, I'm saying summer because I'm trying to keep it vague, but probably, and I would say probably in July and August or somewhere around there.
I mean, from having the conversations to say, for example, things go well, like in the ideal situation, you talk to people, they're like, yeah, that actually sounds good. You work with the county says, and I don't know, is that a rezoning? Is that they say, okay, maybe we'll interpret this differently, or is it?
What we expect is if things go smoothly is we conduct some outreach where we reach out to the community. And this is part of working with your partner agencies in the area, right? Mm-hmm. Is that we would probably do some of this outreach, talk to people, go to the board of commissioners at the county and have a conversation where we say, we did this outreach. This is what we heard. These are the things we think we may do or may modify. And we would like you to modify some of the text that held this project up in the past. And then we would ask that they assign it to their staff, but we'll also in the background be talking to those staff and saying, are you willing to do this? Would this give a pathway to yes for these things? And so all of these things are often happening in the background, but it's just staff doing their work. Right.
So that would say that all goes well, and then you're actually able to start the process of
and so then it's someone else doing work and seeing how fast they get it. So I would hope that they can do that and it's not too hard and it goes smoothly and they get it done maybe in winter or spring for that text amendment. We reapply with the city and the county. That's probably another couple of months going through land use because we basically have to update the documentation, but we shouldn't have to do much more than that.
Yeah.
And then we would be ready to move into construction.
Okay.
But it would be pretty tight and everything would have to go pretty smoothly and on time to get directly into building that bridge next summer. And we'd have to see what other things we have in the queue. So one of the things we have coming up is on July 10th this year, we've got a special board work session that we're going to be doing. And that one is going to highlight some of the priorities for the board, bring in some of those new board members and let the board members all talk to each other. And it's going to give staff some certainty that the things that are priorities now are still priorities after that work session. And that project is one of those things we'd be talking about. How important is that? Where does it fit in with all the other things going on?
Yeah.
And that's what we need to have certainty on. Do you want us spending prioritizing that? Or do you want us working more on the construction projects that we have now?
Yeah.
Do you want the clubhouse to be a higher or lower priority than that one at the golf course?
Yeah.
And then there are other things, plenty more things.
Right.
The Newberg Dundee bypass trail is a big one.
Yeah. So super optimistic next summer, maybe a little more realistic. 2 years.
If it was both high priority and went smoothly, maybe.
Maybe. Okay. So probably more realistically 3 years.
I'm willing to say two.
Two.
I would like to see it too. But some of it also depends. We just don't have enough funds to build everything all the time, all at once, and to constantly be churning things out because we do have limitations and constraints on our finances. That said, we often pursue grants, which we've been very successful. I'm very pleased about. And we have a foundation that occasionally helps us get that stuff done too. Yeah. So we have a nonprofit foundation, Chehalem Park Foundation, that people occasionally make gifts to, whether that's
let's get to that because
sure.
I want to. That's a good thing to actually mention.
I'm happy to talk about our foundation.
Okay, there's other projects though, and I know we could easily talk for quite a bit on each one. But talking about the trail, that was one of the big ones. Where are things at with that?
So one of the first big phase is the one that's under construction for this summer, and so the main thing is building a bridge. And so this is actually something that's in the Oregon Department of Transportation, or ODOT, right-of-way next to the bypass. Mm-hmm. And the alignment that we're building for this phase one goes from Industrial Way, which is kind of what I think of as like a trailhead where the sidewalk ends, and then it pops out into the right-of-way, and then it goes along the alignment over a creek, and then comes out somewhere near Rogers Landing. And so I think that'll be a really neat trail alignment that gives people access from two different areas that you don't currently get to access. And then beyond that, phase two, when we want to eventually do that, and I know at least one of our board members, it's a really high priority for him, phase two would actually take us from out in that area all the way out to Dundee.
Okay. So, and I'm guessing
which feels far away, but it's actually not that far away. And that segment, that phase two, is actually the harder part because it's got more potential creek crossings depending on the design.
Okay. So, and I pulled up a map again just because I'm trying to remember. So Industrial Parkway, that's where you got like Caravan Coffee and the Go Fast Wraps. And
that's right.
Out of those places over there along 219. If you come down, you go all the way to the end of Industrial Parkway, there's a little like trail there that goes along the bypass.
That's right.
Then kind of to the south of the airport there.
Mm-hmm. South side of the airport, moving west. And then it's going to go over a creek alignment that we see there.
So it's right. Does this also have to do with the, so with Friends Park, there was a parcel there that you guys had bought back. Is that anything to do with?
So that we ended up purchasing, and we were talking to the property owner at the time about that, but that ended up just being made the park bigger.
Okay.
But largely made it bigger, not from flat playable areas, but more of a natural area setting.
Okay.
We could do park expansions right now. I don't think we have anything planned for how that would connect, but the whole point of trail systems, ideally, is to make connections between places. And some of the great places for when you think of trail networks can be connecting homes with schools and parks, things that people of lots of different ages can use on a regular basis to really keep them active. So how do you make those routes happen? And trails can be a great way of doing that, and a way that you don't have as many conflicts of either pedestrians or sometimes bicycles.
Yeah.
You let them use those extra spaces.
Yeah. So this trail, would it be so Winooski kind of comes next to the bypass, then crosses over. Would this go like underneath and in between, or would it go over connect on the left?
I will make a suggestion, and that is that people go to our website and that they look at the project webpage for this. So you can go under current projects and find this and other ones.
Okay.
And so this would be the Newberg Dundee bypass trail, or you could just type in the search bar bypass trail, and it should take you to the project webpage.
So CPRD, I'm going to try this live and see. Obviously, people can't.
Oh, you're going to test our website.
I'm going to test your website.
That's scary. So
if I go to see, so the bypass trail, and then
Gosh, you found it first Google result. We must be doing a great job.
must be okay.
There we go.
So it shows. Okay, so you can see like it shows basically a red like trail that's kind of going up all the way through here.
Red trail, dotted line, kind of going through there.
So basically, it shows it like kind of connecting with Winooski and 11th Street.
It'll parallel it, and so
it's also just a highlighted.
And so at one portion, it will go onto the portion of sidewalk or multi-use path that's already there.
Okay.
And it actually goes under Highway 18 at one point. So that portion's already built as you cross River Street.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
So some of this is an exercise in filling in the gaps.
Yeah.
So we're trying to use existing networks where they exist so that we can get the most bang for our buck.
Yeah.
So that's some of the strategy that's used on this particular trail.
Well, it's a good idea too. That reminds me, it kind of reminds me of the city planning page. And this is, I don't know, probably shouldn't ask you questions about planning, should I?
You can ask me. I mean, you can ask me questions about whatever you'd like to.
Well, so here's an example. So actually, right there, when you're on 11th Street, you're going up Winooski. There's a one of those white signs. It's like the public land use notice.
Sure.
But for me, like I see those signs a lot of times when I'm driving, and I'm like, I can't stop right now because the first panel will hit me, or I'm going to be clogging up traffic. But I'm always curious when I see those things, just because as a real estate agent, I always want to know what's being built and where. And I just like knowing because I'm curious. But sometimes then I go to the city's website, and there's so many projects that are either in review or approved, and I'm scrolling through. I'm like, where I know there's something here. Is there anything where you can like look at a map and see like search by address and like click on
I will say that is a city question. To the best of my knowledge,
to the best of your knowledge,
they may not have a mapped feature like that. Although I know that the city recently launched a new website. They've also got a new permitting system, and it's something they've been trying to figure out how to work because they do want better communication to be out there.
Yeah.
But that would be best for something that if folks want to reach out.
CPRD question.
Not a CPRD question, but I think specifically the city's community development department, as someone who formerly worked in that department, would be happy to point people in the right direction and tell them what resources they do have.
For CPRD, do you guys have a place where someone can like see a map that has all the CPRD parks?
We do have some maps at a couple of different places where we have the park maps. One of the things I would say is our district is pretty big. So if you scale out a map, the parks start looking pretty small. So we're actually hoping to send out a district-wide mailer as early as September.
Okay.
That we're hoping that can have something like a map that highlights some of the things, but we might not end up doing it to scale. It might be more of a kind of graphical representation of some of the highlights from the district to kind of catch people's interest. Inspired via kind of Disneyland maps and those sorts of things. Get people excited about things they may not know about. Yeah. And doing a mailer like that, one of the biggest reasons we would do something like that is to engage with the people that don't already know us. Yeah. So some of the people that, if you're already involved in youth sports, you know who CPRD is. Right. If you're already doing our camps and recreation, you know who CPRD is. If you're doing lessons with the Aquatic Center, you already know who we are. But there are people, think of those unincorporated areas in particular. They might not be inside the city. They might think it's a city park system and that it's not for them. But that's not true. They might be in the district boundary. We really want to make sure they know that they take advantage of some of the things that we have for them. Yeah. Yeah. For example, with Bob and Krista Riley Park, I did a video about some of the trails on my YouTube channel, the Living in Newberg channel. And a lot of people had no clue that it existed, if they haven't been hearing about all the developments and stuff. I had no clue all these trails were there. I know at least one of our full-time staff, I'm looking at you, Amber, then that haven't been there yet. And they need to go because it's really a gem. It's wonderful. And for folks that don't know, it's really something special, especially when we find ourselves in wine country. Yeah. We have all this ag and it's wonderful, but that means we have fewer of certain other things. And so to find something that's a big shared space like that, we should really be taking advantage of those things, in my completely biased opinion. Well, moving on, because I know we have still other things to talk about. I know the Renne Field. We should know because we just sold the Renne sisters' property. Like we always got named Renne. It's not Renne, it's Renne. So that park, which we through that transaction we met the people who Lego is named after, which is kind of a fun experience. Mm-hmm. But that's a big project too, right? That's happening. Is that happening this year? It's a big project and it's really unique. So we're not going to be able to get to that one in this construction season because of some things that have come up. but that's joint with the school district. So that's Renne Field, and it's owned by the school district rather than owned by CPRD. But we want to be able to make sure that we create additional playing and sports fields available for folks, particularly that are available year round. It will probably come as almost no surprise whatsoever that it's really hard to maintain sports fields that are grass if it's wet and dark all winter, and if it's dry and too sunny and just dry all summer. Those are some of the harshest conditions you could possibly have for a field. So they're getting too dried out or they're getting too wet. And so it's hard to have year-round sports going on those fields. So that particular one will be the first time that we're investing in a turf field for the public.
So how does that work if it's managed by the schools, which is a the school district is its own separate entity.
Yep.
Right.
That's true.
So how is that connection, that partnership working?
Let me take your question one further.
Okay.
Is your question also, does the school district do sports or does CPRD do sports?
Yes.
So the school district handed over a number of responsibilities, not all of them, because the school district does a lot, for a number of sports programs and sports ages over to CPRD. And so particularly think middle school sports. We run most, if not all, of the middle school sports associated with this. I don't know the school district so intimately that I can say that they don't do any, but they do far fewer because we've taken on a number of those responsibilities. And it has created this really fantastic partnership where they get to focus on education and we get to continue focusing on recreation. And so we get to administer those, but they have kind of a hierarchy associated with using and renting their school facilities. So school gets first pick, CPRD gets second pick, nonprofits get pick after that, and then I think it's general use or something along those lines. Again, school district thing, but intimately related to what we do for CPRD.
Okay. From a funding standpoint, if it's not your property, I'm sure there has to be some type of MOE, like
That's right.
Memorandum of Understanding, is that what it's called?
In this case, an intergovernmental agreement.
Okay.
But if it were private entity to private entity or government to private entity, it'd be an MOU, like you said.
Okay.
But in this case, it would be what we would call an IGA. Okay. And so we're signing up for essentially a 35-year lease to ensure that if we're going to invest in that property, it remains something that's available to our district for that time.
Right.
And we just have to make sure that it's meeting everyone's needs. So the school district, clearly their age cohorts and the student age folks that they care for and want to provide things to, they get to be there. So they can provide the property, they can invest some funds. We can also administer a number of those programs, but we obtained a grant, and that one's from Oregon Department of Parks. We obtained a grant that's going to be helping pay for that as well. So it's important for us to get moving on those things and not let it linger too long.
Okay. Is 35 years, is that because that's about how long a turf field?
Oh, we asked for way more years.
Oh, okay.
So I think we asked for a 99-year lease or something like that. And that's the whole thing of balancing those needs. So we needed it to be at least a certain number of years because of the grant deadlines and our investment. And the park and the school district, to their credit, they needed it too because that site is contemplated for eventual expansion, and they wouldn't necessarily want to expand over the park area, but if they had to encroach or modify things, they need the flexibility to be able to grow too. And I think that we understand that and we want to work with that. Yeah.
One quick question about turf fields. Some, like with grass, the grass is always growing, it rains, it kind of washes things through. What about I know dogs aren't allowed on there, but people are always taking this is frustrating to me. I always see people on their, taking their pets out there and it seems gross. How does turf get
cleaned?
Cleaned?
It has to be cleaned.
Okay.
You have to clean it once in a while. You have to take care of it as certain care requirements. I'm not intimately familiar with care, and frankly, we don't have a turf district or a turf field in our special district. So we're going to be taking some lesson learned from the school district and the high school specifically because they have a turf field, or from other local folks, and probably also train our staff to make sure we care for those sorts of investments appropriately.
Okay. So there is a cleaning process. But
yes, you want it. Plus, there is solarization. It's out there in direct sun, so that's going to cure some things.
Okay.
So just for anyone that's concerned about dog things at any park, the sun does cure some stuff.
Yeah. The sun damages more than just
it. Yeah. It doesn't just damage all the things you want to keep.
Yeah. No, that's good. And then the last one that I specifically wanted to mention, was with just because it's right by my parents' house in Dundee, is the Sanders estate right next to.
That is a really exciting one. That is a priority for multiple board members that we have right now to get that thing moving. So that, I will say that it was either my first or my second day on the job that I went over to meet with Steve Dahl, the city manager over the city of Dundee, to talk about that specific park. So that's the level of priority that park is right now.
Okay.
So that's something that the master plan was initially completed in 2021,
Right.
but it went back to city council due to some unexpected things associated with getting to construction. And so we've been really hustling, and we expect that is going to go out to bid anytime. And so we should be under construction by early July is our goal.
Oh,
and then,
yeah.
And so that's going to have 4 phases. And so it's going to be built over time. But that first phase is going to include parking and restrooms. And I believe it includes construction of the splash pad over there, which will be our second splash pad in the district. I mean, think for kids, it'll be summertime.
Available?
There are some shade-like structures over there. And then we also have plantings. And we're hoping that there might be opportunities. So if anyone out there is listening and there's opportunities to salvage trees from other spaces or to find ways to help contribute to this sort of thing, because it's a big park and it's a big effort, they can reach out. But we're doing that first phase of that park.
Exciting.
We're going to try and make it so there's shade, but I don't think there's a shade structure right near there. There's a big oversized bench with planters on the back of it. That's a kind of bench combo planter feature. So those sorts of things. But again, the site plans for that are, I believe there's a map, although it's been in the sun for a while, at the park site. But there's also on our website, you can go to the web pages and look for that under current projects.
Okay. So 4 phases, and then that should get started, at least this summer.
It's getting started this summer.
Okay.
That's the answer.
It
is happening.
It is happening. Well, it'll be exciting. I think it was 2021 when I first saw it. Again, me thinking that things that should happen way soon. I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to have a park any day. And then, recognizing always has to.
And some things can take a hard time between people, money, and time. It's a tough situation, but that's where that prioritization comes in.
Yeah. How many parks are there total in all of CPRD's district?
That's a great question. So there's approximately 25 parks.
Okay. That's a lot to maintain.
It is a lot to maintain. As a new guy for the organization, it's a lot to even remember.
Yeah. So what are you most excited about?
So I'm, honestly, as on the more administrative side of things, I'm really excited about being able to engage with our board in some priorities discussion for the first time. So that's a me excitement. And then I'm also excited about finding ways to make things better, both for our staff, kind of empowering them, and doing a better job of hearing from the public and giving them better information about what we have available to them. So there's, to me, that is making sure that all of our staff are trained up, ready to do their jobs, and that they keep getting better over time and they feel supported in what they're doing. So that's a very unexciting behind the scenes kind of a thing that most people don't get to see. But I will know it when I see high levels of satisfaction to our team, where people are telling me they're out kicking butt and they're doing a great job. And then when the public starts telling us things, we'll know we're doing a good job communicating, because they say, oh, I had this great experience, and they feel like they can communicate with us. Or if I see things on social media where someone asks a question and we've done such a good job communicating that someone who's kind of a fan of ours is able to answer their questions about us, those are successes that I get to see. And so that's we'll see some of those symptoms of us doing a good job out in the community.
There's something that we had stopped, and I said, oh, let's come back to that. Oh, the foundation.
Oh, yeah.
So
would you like to know more?
Yeah, I know we're running short on time, but
okay. So the foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit. The board we have for that is actually the same elected officials. So it's the same people wearing different hats.
Okay.
But people can make donations to that. My understanding is how it's typically been used in the past is that if someone through a planned gift or an estate gift wants to donate land to the district, that it's been a vehicle for that. And that's certainly one of the ways that those work. But also, if there's something where someone wants to donate something to the park and it's the park district, and it's not quite a fee, it's something that maybe it's intended to go directly to a certain sport, almost like a booster club type application, but it needs to come in somehow. They can donate it to the foundation, and the foundation gives it back to the district because they've maybe directed it to do so. But that runs memorial bench programs. It runs all sorts of improvements. You can designate it to certain parks. So it's something that I'd like to make more visible so that people know about it. And, I was told way back when I was on the board for the Channel Islands Park Foundation years ago, I was told by another executive director of a different nonprofit for a foundation. She said, you know why this isn't going to be successful? It's because no one wants to give money to the government if they don't have to. And that was a little bit of a blow because I felt really strongly about parks. I felt really strongly about Channel Islands National Park at the time. And I was able to say, you know what? She's not completely right. Because you think of things like, the nation's best idea. Isn't that Ken Burns? Or the country's best idea? Look at it. It's a documentary series. It's all about our national parks. It's very inspiring. It'll make everyone want to make summer travel plans. But parks feel different. And so it is one of those high touch things, whether it's a park or a library or something that's civic and that is shared by the public and everyone gets to love. And we have fantastic partners. We have local community groups that have donated to the park district and helped us build playgrounds in the past. We have partners that have helped us do things that are good for that. But that park foundation is a really special vehicle for doing that. And so if folks ever have questions, we're happy to talk about it. But I don't think we shout about that enough. It's a really special thing.
So I know there's a lot of like land donations. Well, maybe not a lot, but a lot of it is land donations. Like with Bob and Crystal Riley, that was not exactly a donation, but pretty close compared to the value.
It was, yeah. So it was something that was sold by a willing seller, and we were able to purchase it. But it was a willing seller who knew they wanted it to be protected in perpetuity and available to the public.
Yeah. So how much, if you're talking like dollar amounts, like what kind of amount of funding do you get at the foundation on an annual basis?
I think it varies substantially. So I think it's typically less than $75,000 a year.
Okay.
But for example, if there is a single gift, I believe, and we've had more than that. Let me just say that. I don't want to disclose individual donors and the contributions they made because that wouldn't be appropriate, but we've had those sorts of things given to us for certain uses, and it lets us invest in those parks in a special way that's separate and goes beyond what we can do with our tax base.
And someone can say, hey, I want this money to go towards this specific thing.
That's right.
Right?
They can.
So they can.
If you love lacrosse and you want to put it towards youth sports, boom, you can restrict that and make that gift to that.
So here's an example. We were talking about Rotary.
Sure.
And the Early Birds Club had been talking about helping Scott. Is it Scott Levitt or Scott Leavitt? Scott Levitt. About investing in that park because that's kind of old and I don't know where that is right now. Maybe but the last I had heard that they were working on kind of doing a feasibility study of.
They are interested. And so we've been talking to them, and that's one of the nice things about having local partners. And I think I've told other people that in my opinion, Newberg and the Newberg Dundee area has a very Goldilocks kind of a feel to it. It's not too big. It's not too small.
Yeah.
You can know everybody, but you also have a little bit of space. So they're not right up in your space. So what we have with that is Rotary is one of those groups that talked to us. They told us that they would like to do something from their foundation to the park district.
Yeah.
And so our foundation may have to be involved in accepting that, or it might be that they purchase things outright and do work or
okay.
like that. So if they choose to proceed or any other organization chooses to proceed, it's going to be fantastic and we'll be able to do something and they get to be really proud of that. You can look at some of the parks at the Chehalem Cultural Center and at Memorial Park, and Rotary has been a really great partner for those sorts of things. So shout out to Rotary.
Yeah, Rotary.
And I just want to say I'm completely biased. I'm a Rotarian, and
I guess I should say that I am too then, because I'm on the foundation board of the Noon Club.
Just so we're clear, I think that from the park district as a partner perspective, I would say I would have given them a shout out anyway.
Yeah,
because
Rotary, they objectively do good things.
They do.
So the board changes. You mentioned there's a couple new members, and from a kind of hierarchy, it's almost like, the public, they vote the board into place. The board collectively kind of is your boss, right?
Oh yeah. I have 5 bosses. That's right.
That together they have to decide what they tell you to do. And then from there, things kind of.
That's right. So the board officially has one employee, and that's the superintendent of the park district. And then the park superintendent has all the other employees under them. And so that's where I'm at. And it's been a great experience getting to know all the diverse things that our team does. And it has been a lesson learned because I came in from a very different background. The experiences that I had prior to this were mostly outdoor recreation, outdoor education, and community development and planning, not a typical municipal parks and recreation background and pathway. So some of the folks that we have people that have specialized in golf over the years, people have specialized in aquatics, people that have specialized in sports. And so you have all these great tracks. And that allows us to have this really broad array of offerings that I think is special.
Yeah. So the board, do you think does it really change anything? These new members, do you feel like that's going to change the direction of CPRD, or is it mostly going to be
Definitely.
the same? Okay.
Because you have different voices and only 5 decision makers. Each elected official is 20% of any given decision, right?
Right.
So there's an easy way to swing things a bit. And that's why this July 10th meeting that we're going to have on priorities is so crucial to make sure that we're sharing with those new board members the things that were identified as priorities in the past, and then giving them space to have a discussion about, do these still resonate with us? And that could be, maybe the priorities have changed for the people that were already there and that they want to make changes, as well as the folks that are new voices on that board. So it's important that we do that.
Yeah. And a great resource for people is the board meetings, but the public can...
The board meetings can be great, although so can our minutes if you don't have time to sit through a board meeting.
So where can people go and find what's going on?
I'll be honest, what I always do, CPRDNewberg.org is our website. And if you just go to the How Do I, and then there's a public meetings tab, you're right there.
Okay.
And so that's, I think, a really easy way to find it. And you can tune in remotely via Zoom. I think our audio and our video is pretty good. Mm-hmm. So shout out to our IT folks. They do a good job of making sure people can hear and see what's happening. And then you can also just go through the minutes, or people can call if they have a specific area of interest. Mm-hmm. Staff is always happy to talk to folks.
And if you really are short on time, you can plug the minutes into ChatGPT. It'll summarize the whole PDF for you.
Ooh, you probably could. I have no doubt in my mind.
Well, anyway, that is about it for time. I know there are so many other things we could talk about, but Clay, I really appreciate you taking the time to share where things are at with CPRD. And I'm looking forward to the new leadership that we've got there, and that you're kind of the one steering the ship. So we've got a lot of good things ahead of us.
Thanks, Daniel. I'll see you in one of our parks soon.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Giving Town podcast. Our mission with this podcast is to provide hope and inspiration to our community by sharing the stories of the amazing leaders here. This podcast is brought to you by my real estate team, the Joyful Roberts Group. And whether you're looking to buy or sell your home anywhere around Newberg and beyond, we would love to serve you. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter with the link in the show notes, and I'll catch you in the next episode.